Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Unchurched Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds, we are back, and I got a special guest. This is not his first time coming on the podcast. It might be the third, actually,
wow.
Which is very, very, very rare that someone gets invited back.
You're getting to the bottom of the barrel here.
No, or we get enough requests to have Dr. Ben back on. But I've known Ben for a while. Has an amazing podcast, Designed to Heal. You guys should definitely listen and subscribe. There are some just eye-opening stats. Some of the guests you have on there are just like legit guests. These aren't just wackadoodle doctors out there. I mean, you've had some people that are like legit. Like I'm like, whoa, why isn't this in the news? I mean, really, really shocking stuff. And we were talking here recently, and Ben had shared that the life expectancy, and here in America, this is not in some third world country, really for one of the first times in maybe history is now going down, right? And I think a lot of people get shocked even hearing that, because you would think with all the technology and all this biomedicine and all this stuff out there that it would be the opposite. And yet we're going in the wrong direction. And so I don't even know where all this is going. So I was like, all right, dude, we got to get you on the podcast to talk about this. So first and foremost, welcome back to the show, Dr. Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me. Well, I love to talk with your people, and love the work that you do. So yeah, it is one of those episodes, Joe, where we do have to talk about it, right? Not to beat people up or to even scare people or to be discouraging, because I think there is if that was all this was about, was bad news, right? If you were just getting on and talking about all the fish dying, that would not be a good episode, right?
Right.
But if you had things you could do about that, and then that would be good. So that's really what I want to talk about today.
So let's talk about this problem. Is this men and women? I know you had mentioned men in your text, but is this men and women that it's going down?
So it is fascinating. No surprise, women are always a little better than us, and so women has gone down, but not even close to men. So right now, Joe, there is a span of over this alone is fascinating. So just to give people the numbers, the life expectancy for men has dropped down to 73 point, depending on the study, by about 73.2, 73.3 for men, and then there's a gap there about 5.9 years for women. So men are at 73.2 years. Women are at 79.1 years. So right now in the United States, the average woman is living 6 years longer than men. Now we could make jokes about that, right? That they stress us out or something like that, but that's a crazy delta right there, right? I mean, I know that we're, made in the likeness and image of God, but I didn't read the part where he said, men should die much younger than women. So there is an anomaly. There is an abnormality. And just to give a little more context on this for the listeners, this undid about 20 years of progress, where to your point, Joe, we were going up. And then, but can contrast in this, I mean, there's countries like Japan, Korea, Portugal, UK, Italy, Turkey, China, these countries that literally, not even do they live longer than us, it's significant. Like many of them are in the 80s, okay, for men and women. And so if I'm sitting there, again, forgive the fishing analogies, but if I'm fishing and somebody is crushing it right across from me, I can't sit there and just blame the lake and blame the water and blame the wind and blame the boat and blame my tackle. I might be part of the problem. And so when I look at that, I go, man, what can we learn from that? And there are some things that we need to talk about that we can learn. The first part, though, that I would want to just say to your listeners, as it relates to the faith, I am a person, and the scriptures would support this, that it says that he knows our days. So Joe, I want to make sure that I come at this from that perspective. To me, this isn't necessarily about hey, do these things and you're going to live longer.
Right.
I think that's dangerous water to tread on. People die of many different things. I had recently a person that I know that was killed in a car accident, right? These types of things happen. So I want to be clear. This isn't, do this legalistic lifestyle and you live to be 100. It's more about the vitality of those years that we have. So maybe not adding years to life, but life to years for sure. So I don't want a person to miss that.
I love it. Well, I think we're all dying to know, like, what is the cost of this, right? Just like with the fish analogy. I love your analogies, by the way. We kind of know what's killing them. Is it toxins? Like what is happening, or is it a mixture of things? Is my guess.
Yeah. Well, so it is always a mixture, and these studies are sometimes difficult because you can imagine it's complicated. But what they came out, and by the way, this was a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So this is, they're using hard data, they're crunching the numbers, and the things that they listed, the big ones, Joe, were, and I just give a caveat here because, obviously we went through the COVID years, all right? This is during that same time frame. The part that is interesting for listeners to know, so the average COVID age of death was just over 81 years old. So that wasn't a major driver. When you look about changing averages, if it's a bunch of older people that pass away, that's not going to drive your number down. I think that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
So what they were saying, it's a component. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the main driver. The main drivers, they said, were the opioid epidemic, mental health, and chronic metabolic disease. This says are certainly front and center on this. And so this is what I would say. So the word metabolic disease, maybe that makes sense to people. That's your diabetes, that's your blood pressure, that's these, types of cholesterol, these kinds of things, diseases of lifestyle. You often hear them said. The great news about all three of those, in my opinion, Joe, is, and I know you're very open on your show, you've struggled with certain health issues and in the past and had victory in those things.
Yep.
But you can't open up a newspaper today and not read about the mental health concerns for our nation, our children especially, and just chronic diseases on the rise. I'll give you one quick statistic. 1986, the average chronic disease rate for kids was about 12%. We're now at over 54% of our kids have a chronic disease. And Joe, a chronic disease is considered a disease that is like you'll never not have it. That's by definition. Okay. Like once you've been given this label. And so you can do, so all of those things, obviously the opioid one, I think we don't have to beat that one up. I think people certainly know the concerns and what happened there. But when it comes to metabolic disease and the mental health disease, I'll just give you some thoughts. Come now back to the scriptures, for example, or just for memory, right? Our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. Sometimes people feel like, oh man, like I've got to take care of myself. And I know you've shared on some of your journey on just wellness and health, but I see it, Joe, as a form of worship to the God that made us, right? I see it as, not this thing I have to do, but almost a form of gratitude. Sometimes I say, like, if you ever need like a organ transplant, and somebody had, died and you got their liver or kidney or their heart, you'd probably be so thankful for that because that allowed you to live.
Yeah.
Well, those people that are, believe that they were created, by God and there's a divine creation there's almost that sense of gratitude to that. So I don't want to, again, come across like this is this, oh, you got to work out. We take care of a lot of things. Imagine if you're listening to this, you take care of your car, you take care of your house, you feed your kids a certain, food and lifestyle. You probably take care of your boat and your fishing equipment, because the more you take care of it, the longer it lasts and the better outcomes you have. Well, our bodies are the same way. Many of us grew up thinking it's all about genetics, and of course genetics matter and genetics are real. However, a lot of things that we do affect our genetics, affect how our genetics express themselves. So the big ones, Joe, that we kind of know about are, of course, when it comes down to things like obesity. So the United States is number one in one category in the industrialized world, and that is obesity.
Boo.
And there's just no way to sugarcoat that, no pun intended, right? There's just, I know it's uncomfortable. I'm not fat shaming. We're adults here. We can have these conversations. When you look at the drivers of disease, obesity tops the list. And then of course you get into things like tobacco use, things like excess alcohol use. I know these are somewhat uncomfortable, but and I'm not here to, again, a legalistic lifestyle, but let's know that those things are having impacts. And if they're going to take an average of 6 years off my life compared to my wife, I want to beat those odds, right? And we need to know that. So that thankfully the body has an amazing resiliency. We understand that when we cut our arm or break a bone, our bodies are amazing healing mechanisms. Like my podcast is called Designed to Heal. I wrote a daily devotional, the same name, Designed to Heal, to help us appreciate that healing capacity of the body. So a lot of times, and then ask me some questions, Joe, but a lot of times what I find is people just maybe have forgotten that or underappreciate that. And we think it's just all kind of, it's up to what my grandma and grandpa's genes were, and that's my destiny, and there's really not much I can do. And that's kind of a fatalistic approach. And then if you believe that, then it really wouldn't matter what you eat or if you move or how you take care of yourself or your mental health. And from the mental health component, of course, I know we're on the Unchurched episode. I can't express enough of the power of the Word of God, the power of prayer, the power of community when it comes to things like stress, things like, if anything happened over these last few years through the pandemic, was the isolation. And I know that was one of the things that was so great about your industry and the work you do is it kept people together. It kept people out and about and being with each other and being out in God's creation. And I think that was a real, incredible benefit for people. They should do a study, Joe. We should do the lifespan of fishermen. I bet it's longer.
I love it. It probably is.
They're all hanging out. They're hanging with their friends. They're laughing. They're in God's creation. They're getting some sunshine. We should do that study. That'd be good. That's the way you can beat it. Go fishing.
I love it. So we got three things. I'm going to take out opioid just because that's a choice. And I'm hoping most of our listeners do not have that problem. I know there might be some that have, not because of, oh, hey, I'm an addict, but I've had some friends that have gone in for a normal surgery and then got addicted to something that said just took over their life and was really, really scary. I'll do the same thing. I'll kind of eliminate the mental part, because I know when I was going through the anxiety attacks, I felt like I had no control over it. It wasn't something I'd choose, but the chronic metabolic disease and the obesity, that is something that is in our for the most part, something we choose, right? Why do you think in that one in particular, what do you think has happened? Are we just become lazy and sitting behind desks, or is it the food and all this processed stuff that's put in front of our faces every day? And the fact, like, what do you think it is? I know you've done some podcasts about, just food in general. Yeah. Where did we go wrong?
Yeah, it's a great question. Matter of fact, one of the quotes out of here, because you alluded to this, it says, the decline of life expectancy in the U.S. suggests that the advancement in medical treatment are no longer sufficient to counter ongoing public health crisis. Meaning, we're rob Peter to pay Paul. I saw a study the other day, Joe, that said drinking two sodas a week offsets, if you're doing all the rest of the health lifestyle stuff. 2 sodas a week is offsetting the benefits of that. That's like a study out of Canada. And they were talking about, of course, sugary drinks and things like soda. So I think what my premise is this: we've kept adding on the kind of the bad side of the scale, right? And we just tipped it. It's maybe like again, forgive me for all these lake metaphors, but there's probably like a natural kind of biodiversity in a lake, and then if it gets too out of hand, too many things get dumped in it, or too many, I don't know how it works, too many boats come in with the stuff that shouldn't be there, or a predator fish comes in, or however that works. Like all of a sudden the whole biome of that lake could be messed up, right? And it had been maybe functioning normally for, hundreds of years, and then, off run of chemicals or something like that, and it messes up the lake. I would say that's what's happened. And now it took a while. It took, I would maybe say, decades through, like you said, processed food and sedentary lifestyles. The average child right now, Joe, spends 7 hours in front of a screen every day. That wasn't around 20 years ago. Like that wasn't possible. So we can't discount those things. I think unfortunately, we've added too many kind of bad things, if you will, and there was no corollary on the good side. And so the scales have tipped. And when those scales tip, again, pun intended, now you do need to know, and I think this is part of the point. There is an industry out there that is, we all live in this world of commercials, and they want to sell us more food and junk food. And the processed food industry certainly loves to do that to you. We know enough about this. They design foods to make our taste buds explode. And, new flavors and new this and new that. And does ultra processed food is a term that you maybe have heard of recently. There's actually a great book recently I read called Ultra Processed People. And it goes pretty deep, but they're just talking about how they make this food so chewable. And so it knows how to almost, it sounds crazy, Joe, but it almost addicts you that you'll find yourself eating more than you would have eaten because you can chew less to process it. And it lights you up so fast, and it takes longer to fill you up. So you eat more calories, even though it was the same size of food and all these kinds of interesting things. And so at the end of it, you go, well, I don't know. I didn't really change much. Why am I gaining weight? Or why am I, this? And it's almost been kind of done behind your back, somewhat insidious. Now, we can blame those companies, and I think they probably deserve some of the blame. But ultimately, at least at this point, for most of us, we decide what goes on our fork and our plate, right? And so that's part one. But I don't want to always make this about food. I would say part two is we do need to move our bodies. And I know that everybody has different lifestyles and different job requirements. But the good news is the demand, the requirements that we know get the best results. It's not crazy, Joe. It's like, average between about 120 total minutes of physical activity a week. So, if you're out walking, 3 to 5 times a week, for 20 or 30 minutes, you're going to get there. Now, of course, some people love to do more advanced workouts and high intensity training, but there's just no replacement for that. There's no hack for that. There's no pill for that. Yep. It's just, we're going to have to do those things. And so sometimes, I remember, Joe, I was out fishing with a guy one time, and he likes sport fishing. So like the ocean, like blue marlin stuff.
Yeah.
And when we got back in, so a great day of fishing, and we come back, and I didn't grow up in that world. I'm from the Midwest, so I do a lot of ocean fishing, and just watching them, after we got back, after a whole day of fishing, the job wasn't done. They cleaned the boat, they hosed it off, they, do all the things that they need to do. And I just remember thinking, man, like there's more to fishing than just catching fish, right? The responsibility of maintaining your boat and all the things, it's just part of the job. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of this is we just got to kind of mature and say, I know I might not love working out. I know I don't maybe love, quote, eating healthy, but I need to put enough of that rhythm in my life so I can get maybe some more years, or certainly more activity, active years of those life. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. And I feel like it was you on the podcast, and we were talking about the percentage of people that do have a heart attack from this same issue, right? That don't even change. Like, obviously there are plenty of people that do. I mean, maybe it wasn't you, but I remember hearing this, and I was just dumbfounded. And it was like, whatever, let's just say it was 50%. It was something like that of the people who have a heart attack. Like, they're in the hospital bed, doctor saying, hey, if you don't change, this will happen again and you will die early. And half the people don't do anything, or maybe they do for like a week or two and then just go right back into that rhythm. Like, how do you break out of that? Because it is, I mean, it's almost like an addiction, right? To eat that way and to not work out. And like you said, I don't know if it's the foods we're eating or what our body's telling us, but I don't know. It's mind-boggling that if you had a heart attack, you wouldn't have a massive change in your lifestyle.
I've read this study. I did it because I did a heart seminar just a couple of weeks ago, and so I was diving into some of that data, and it was, Joe, it was even crazier than you said. So one of the studies that I saw that was published was they followed up with patients. I think it was 10 years after their event. So these are people that had heart attacks, I think even had surgery, right? Okay. And they were told just what you said, right? I got a good friend patient who's a cardiologist, and he said, we had this conversation. He said, I tell these people, if they would just do, these handful of things, they won't need to see me, most of them, and they'll be okay. And he said, just what you said, most won't do it. But the number I saw, it actually shocked me. That's why I remember this right now. It was 90% of them had not changed. So it was 10% that did. Wow. And so now, Joe, I'm going to say this, and this is just my take on this. I think we have been convinced by culture that it's too hard. It doesn't really matter. Nothing you can do. And it's just like, that gives us enough of an excuse, enough of a justification to just go along with it. It's like, forgive the example, right? It's like, oh, everybody looks at porn, so I might as well too, as a weird example, right? And I think we have to we have to understand, to some degree, why don't we change? But as an individual, if you're listening to this, I just had a consultation with a guy last night before I left, and this is exactly what he said. He goes, he came to the Heart Talk, and he said, I want to have a longer consult with you. And that is exactly what we talked about. I said, I need to take control of my life. I've just been doing whatever I want. I don't really think about it, but he's getting a little older and he wants to be around for his grandkids and all those conversations. So I'll give you one maybe advice. Now everybody's different on this, but we often call it find something to anchor to, find something of, and you've seen those, the blue zones, Joe, you're familiar with that kind of long living culture. Yeah. Yep. So one of those in there is that they find these long living cultures. You'd think it's all about like, oh, what do they eat? And there's a couple of them that are in there about that. But two of them that I think are fascinating. One of the principles of longevity is community. Okay. Like literally friends,
relationships,
people you care about, relationships. One of these areas, I think it's in Sardinia. And that's literally their biggest thing. They don't eat great. They don't have necessarily some phenomenal healthy lifestyle, but they are a very loving community. They all know each other. They take care of each other. They check in with each other. So relationships. So if you're listening to this, and we saw some of this, again, impact over the last few years where we were kind of divided. We were secluded. We were in our houses, work from home, this kind of stuff. And we're seeing it in these numbers. So that's part of it. And then the other one was purpose. And so, of course I get on here and hammer on, we should eat better and we should exercise. And I'm just going to say, if you're an adult, you understand those and make those choices. But these two things can actually lead you to doing that. So when you have purpose in your life, before you and I got on this call today, we were just updating each other on life and family and, and work and things like that. And I know you have a purpose. I know you feel that the weight of that purpose, but that purpose also drives you. And I feel similar. So that's what gets us out of bed in the morning, right? That's when our feet hit the ground. So if you're feeling, and here's what I would say from a faith-based perspective, when God decided to make you, which that's how this works, he decides that it's time for you to exist. It says that he knew us before we were created. He knits us together in our mother's womb. It says he knows the hairs on our head. So by definition, you have a purpose. Not only do you have one, you have a purpose from God. Like that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my parents had purposes for me at times, to do the dishes and clean my room. God has even bigger purposes than that. And so sometimes we just feel like maybe that's not us. We feel like maybe we were overlooked or just forgotten. And the world has a good way of beating that down and beating that out of us. So when I think about things that can move this needle, you ever heard that saying, when your why is big enough, the hows take care of themselves, right? When you latch on to purpose, you find yourself doing different activities. You find yourself eating differently. You find yourself moving your body because you want to feel good because you got work to do. You got purpose to do. So I know that's maybe a little philosophical or a little, maybe seems a little bit out there, but my experience on that, Joe, has been people that really feel a sense of purpose. It's easier for them to get into a healthier lifestyle because they feel they're worth it. They feel like it matters. They feel like they want to be around and do the things that God has called them to do.
I was really hoping you were going to go there. I don't know if you recall in the book Fishing for Happiness that I wrote, but there was 4 pillars of happiness. Let's just call it, a better word is fulfillment. And one of them was having a purpose or mission. And one of the books, and it kind of went down this rabbit hole of, you kind of touched on some of these areas, country civilizations that are living longer than everyone else. And Okinawa was one of the top ones. And there is this whole piece on this one little, let's just call it a village, because it's not like this massive metropolis city, but all the people there, like the lady was kind of going around with this reporter and talk about relationships and community, right? She's walking down this little lane and talking, oh yes, that is so-and-so, his mission and purpose is this. She knew what, like the whole town knew it. She's like, this guy here, his mission and purpose since he was 60 years old has been to keep teaching karate at 100. Guess what? He's 102 and still teaching karate. To your point, he was 60 years old when he declared that was his mission and purpose, right? It was to be able to teach kids karate still at 100. And to your point, yes, you look at your body differently. You look at what you eat differently when you have that as a purpose. And he was like writing that down every single day from 60 to 100. Now he's surpassed it. So I hope he's extending it out and hasn't said like, oh man, I got nothing else to live for. But I remember that story vividly. That can you imagine going around your neighborhood, assuming you live in some sort of neighborhood where you have houses, and you could say, yeah, that's Ben. His mission is this, and now that's Bob and Jane, and this is like she knew what their mission was, and I thought that was so fascinating, and just so happens to be one of the oldest living places in the entire world. Really fascinating.
And as I know we're winding down, but as you're thinking about this and reflecting, sometimes, Joe, and that's maybe the last thing I'll say. So we talked about some things that we should add and add to our life and things, but honestly, what the world has been good at later is, I've never heard that. I've heard the acronym for busy is buried under Satan's yoke, right? And of course, our scriptures say that the yoke is easy, his burden is light. A lot of times, these things that are eating up our joy, that are eating up our purpose, are the things that modern culture has kind of put into us. We hear a lot about it, the social medias, the Netflixes, whatever. So sometimes what we need to actually do is prune the vine, John 15, right? Go in there and get some things out of our lives. When they prune the vine, it actually makes the plant, the fruit, it makes it more fruitful. Okay, so there's a couple things you might need to take out of your life, and that's a good thing. Okay, so so that social might be eating up your heart, and it's causing you to covet, and you're feeling bad about yourself. I don't know. Does it happen in fishing, Joe? Everybody posts their big fish pictures, and then you feel like, I'm a loser. I'm never going to fish again. Look at those guys are so good. So that's not the point of that, right? The point is to encourage and go, oh man, that's awesome, and celebrate for people. And so when you do a little audit of your life, maybe as you're listening today, maybe you came out, it's Sunday, and you had a little time and you saw this pop up and you thought you'd listen to it. Just take a little time and audit your life. Maybe write it down, and maybe there's a habit or two. I suggest not going after 10 things. I suggest picking one or two, right? Just pick one or two. Hey, I'm going to cut back on soda. I'm going to get up and go on a 20-minute walk before I get the kids ready for school. Whatever, one of those. And then those habits can build on each other because then it's sustainable for you. But I just think it's so important what you're doing, Joe. And if this reaches somebody, because, hey, the bottom line, if you just love fishing, you probably want to fish more than 73.2 years. All right. And so do a few things to take care of yourself so you can fish with your kiddos and your grandkiddos and maybe even your great grandkiddos.
I love it, man. Well, this has been great. I know you have a whole lot more on this topic. Where can everyone go follow you and hear you on your podcast, Designed to Heal, on Apple and Stitcher and all the great places? Yeah, the Designed to Heal podcast, that's on all the big ones. I do have a website, just me. It's just drbenroll.com. That's where I have some of the books. Our daily devotional is on there. But yeah, that's probably the best way to keep up with us is on the Designed to Heal podcast. Yeah. And please spell your last name for those people that don't know how to spell raw. Yeah. So it's RALL. Yep. And Ben's alter ego is Ben Raw, the stand-up comedian. I've been called much worse. So, yeah, for sure. Oh, that's funny. We won't go down that road, Joe. Yeah. Well, brother, I appreciate you. This is great. And we'll put this, I guess, on the blog too. So you guys have any questions, or just hit me up. I always leave my email at the very end, joe@saltstrong.com, and I can forward anything over to Ben as well. And otherwise, go check out his podcast. How often do you put new episodes up? We drop a couple times a week. Okay. Yep. We drop Mondays and Thursdays. Okay. Perfect. Cool. Well, check them out. Ben, thank you so much. And everyone, I love you guys. And hit me up if I could do anything to help you, serve you, or pray for you. Otherwise, I'll talk to you on the next episode. 'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. To find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our soul.